communication slides, if there's blank chairs next to you, will you just put one next to that seat? There are a few people in this.
Somebody had fun with that part.
I know that Melissa was going to be here late, and she usually sits right there.
I see pupils
My coworkers, none of them are.
Okay, well let's just hand them around, and I'll wait on this one. Hi. Hello. I almost brought my daughter, and she bailed out.
Oh, right.
I forgot. When I talked to her, to schedule orientation, and she said, you know, we're going to have to give her
She was due right.
yeah, she was due like right around that time.
My mom.
So,
Starbucks met lady and I was like, do I? No.
I never actually met her.
Oh, that's okay. Why? You know what I was doing? I have, do you have a VCR where you're going? No, okay.
When it's 7 a.m. I go to Starbucks before.
Maybe it's like
No,
Yeah.
maybe like 3 hours. So I like.
Yep.
if I don't.
Right. It's just the books. There's one article in that movie, which you can see anytime. It's on Netflix, or I have a copy that I can give you too.
She didn't want to.
So
She didn't want to
watch it out theater.
until things were done, so she was gonna wait.
Oh, thank you.
And then
That's so nice.
It's like,
you never emailed her. No.
I know. It's so great. My husband think my daughter goes, Mom. Right? Exactly.
more than happy to.
Oh, I thought you all knew. She had never said when I'm sending him.
Well, I love coming here with this study. It's been really, really, I really look forward to it every week, and today's our second to last session, which
I know.
but I first, as I like to get started by at least going back to the model and then reviewing some of your assignments and kind of hearing how it's going. This last skill is inductive discipline, which, you know, some of you probably would have preferred to have right up front, but I think what you'll find is when you use some of the other skills, your need for this skill goes down quite a bit. Nonetheless, you still need it. So, where we came from, we started with the first session on really looking at what social and emotional competence was and why it's key to children's success. And then how we as adults are the key to our relationships to foster that. For you two coming in, I handed out the slide handouts. There should be one to your seat. Excellent. And there's a sign-in sheet up here as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, we
Would you
should
guys
sign
please
it.
pass that around? I'll just pass it around. So, with the social and emotional skills that we know are the key to success with kids, academically, socially, the way to foster them is something that I think people don't really understand. And I think it's exciting. Some of the, really what we know is that you all have the power to build these skills in kids and buffer them from stress. Just by the way you interact with them in your day-to-day life. It doesn't have to be a separate lesson on any of this. And so we started by teaching the first two skills, the empathy and the personal message, which really are skills that you just want to keep coming back to because it builds and strengthens your relationship with your own child or children you work with. And as they change and you change, we have to constantly keep going back to that. I have a teenager now. She's like a totally different child to me. I'm like, oh, it's a new person in front of you now. And then the next skill that really is helpful for fostering the ability to problem solve and think ahead, focus your attention and shut out like details that aren't important is collaborative goal setting. It says collaborative problem solving on here because we used to call it that, but I think one of the things I've discovered over the years is that simply helping a child name what they want is so much more powerful than going in and focusing on the problem. It's really good to get an understanding of what the problem is, but sometimes the real shift happens when you help them identify what they want. You may not be able to meet that need, but just knowing it and having somebody else voice it can really decrease power struggles and help your whole relationship. So we did that, and then last week we taught you, in the green are the skills that were traditionally known as behavior modification skills. I hope what you see today and what you learned last week is that this is really different than traditional reinforcement and consequences. The descriptive reinforcement is a way to foster a growth mindset and increase the behaviors that we want without making them dependent on us. So, with that, a little bit of a review. So, descriptive reinforcement, it's a type of feedback. It increases internal motivation and decreases frustration, and we all need it. It involves describing efforts and strategies, and then linking them to the values and the qualities that we know lead to growth mindsets and resilience, like self-control. Self-control is twice as important a predictor of academic achievement than IQ scores are. Then the ability to persist and be in the spite of difficulties. Everybody can do that. We might not get the outcome we want, but if that's a quality you're reinforcing and building in the child, they're more likely to be successful, and so are we, in spite of obstacles. Like respect and concern for others. It's things they can do. And we know from all the happiness research, when you reach out to other people, that's the best buffer against depression. Same thing with being able to make decisions that take other people's feelings into account. Persistence and flexibility. So the idea of describing what the child did, like even though you didn't want to, you remembered it was important to me and you did, you name it, like I felt really respected, or that took a lot of self-control. So you're naming it and then you're linking it with something that, a value that we want to increase and reinforce. So some of the assignments you had due were reading in the Brene Brown, and then the Carol Dweck chapters on mindset, as well as that short article by Bronson on how not to talk to kids. There's so many of these articles like that. So, so let's start with that. Any questions or comments on the readings that you all had? Start with Brene Brown. Brene Brown?
I really didn't define fear as far as with the grateful and fear is supposed to. If you don't appreciate the joy in your life,
Yes.
then how does one cancel the other? She really didn't go into
Oh.
that.
Any other thoughts on that? Because she does it for a lot of the other constructs, but never really thought about that. Huh. What would you have hoped she would have done? Just gone into a little more.
Just to go in it a little bit more and explain it and define it and
Especially the idea of you need to name things in order to manage them and describe them. Yeah.
like what causes the fear.
Yes. I would say from reading her stuff, the fear comes from the messages you send to yourself. So a lot of those shame messages, like you're not going to be good enough, you're not going to be successful, you're not a good person, you're not a good childcare worker. Like
Yes, she said that, but she didn't say whether that was the voices in her head or if that's how it happens with everybody.
Yeah, I would say based on what I've read from her and the way I understand it, there's two ways to look at it. One is Ross Green's way. When your perception, real or otherwise, is that the demands for something that you value exceed your skills and ability to meet that, you get stress or fear. Same thing if, and the messages that you send to yourself also create that. Like, I'm not good enough or I'm not a good person. How about you all? Oh, yeah.
For me, I think,
that core need for feeling like you have the power to affect positive change in things you value. I mean, oh, yes.
For instance, I have one child of mine that lives in New York, and not knowing where I don't have, when they grow up and they move out of the house, you don't have control, you don't know what they're doing. It's the fear also of the unknown.
To protect them.
To protect
Yeah.
them, right. And so if we don't, as she says, fear in the dark, here's my fear of something terrible happening to my children, actually prevented me from fully embracing joy and gratitude.
Right.
Yeah, so, and then it's interesting, because at first I thought I was crazy, because I'm the only person in the world who thought,
Right, but then everybody.
So I guess it's not having, it's so hard for me.
You're doing a great job. I love hearing it. Yeah, keep
You're
going.
not supposed to say good job.
Oh, yes. Well, I think in describing it like you did, it resonates in me what you're describing. And so I think the things that lead to fear in each of us are probably different based on how we grew up. But fear, to me is so related to stress. Understanding your own things that trigger your fear is probably very helpful in beginning to manage them. And sharing it with someone, as Renee talks about with the shame. Hello. There's one at your seat probably. I think. If not, there's some over there. Great. How about anything new or interesting in the Dweck reading? We went over a lot of it in class. The Carol Dweck, the articles that I sent electronically, the chapters 1 and 7 on mindsets.
I like how not talk with your child.
How
don't
not
talk with
that the Bronson one. It was nice and short. I thought it really summarized a lot in the Dweck reading. Yeah.
And again about the thoughts and practice.
It's like it turns everything we know about helping kids upside down. Yeah. Which is sometimes is helpful because if you are struggling, it's to me it's like, oh, there's a different way to do this that might work better. What in particular did you like about the Bronson article? Any good takeaway for you?
I try all my life to price not for you smart or and only about your effort, because I was growing up with the same vision, the same. So my children, I can speak that I grown up them also, not price before they.
You already did. You
I
already did it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see that.
I see the result. I see a result.
And see that it works.
Effort is the most important.
Yes.
When you begin to understand the process,
The whole.
the whole process,
Yeah.
not
It's hard to combat.
It's hard, but it's more. What I like to say, it's more reasonable and more joy in the end of the goal.
Yes. Yeah,
More
the process.
force, the whole process.
And I do think it is helpful in decreasing frustration. If you're a high achiever,
I think
frustration comes very
No,
fast.
it's decreased,
Yes, yes.
not increased. It's
Yes,
decreased.
yes, using this.
And I have real example of my life and of life of my children, my daughter, that she wasn't able to talk at any, and the specialist would say me that she will not talk any constant.
Wow.
And because we did what she did with effort, and my vision and our vision of this, she speaks today 3 languages.
Wow. It's like, I feel like the way in using descriptive reinforcement, you do take the fear down a bit, because there's nothing really to lose. It doesn't mean that there's going to be some outcome associated with what you do. It's more process.
But it's very depend of the atmosphere of the condition that you're growing up. If the most good condition, it's more price. That's why effort is not everybody could accept and understand it to the deepest of meaning of effort.
Thank you.
So I like it very much. And I agree with you.
I mean, what she's saying, growing up, my parents, especially I would say my mother, it wasn't the thing. She never praised me for doing that. That's more modern, more recent. I mean, Mama's always finding fault, and my mother herself was very talented, and so I could not measure up to her. My self-esteem is like, because she never reinforced anything good I did, and she could always do everything better.
Yeah.
And it's till this day.
It's
But
hard to
that's
be
something-
motivated when there's nothing
Right.
you can do that's going
And
to,
for
and then the
instance,
goal just gets
For
higher.
saying that, my mother and my grandmother both
Again,
sewed
Again, I
beautifully.
not.
I was never motivated to do that. You know, I mean, you would think that would come to.
But it was the opposite. You didn't want to do it because the standard was
So
like
high.
to succeed meant
Right.
being this good, as opposed
That's
to
right.
trying
That's right.
and giving it a shot
So,
and not being afraid to make mistakes.
and
Yeah.
instead, I would give all my clothes, if they needed hemming or needed fixing, I let them do it. Why should I even try
Yes.
to bother?
Yes.
But that's how
That's
it
a
is,
great example.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So I have a question about the duet chapters. The
Yeah.
example with the little girl in the gymnastics meet, where she practiced, but then she didn't win, and it gave all these responses that a parent could have, and then it said why they weren't appropriate responses, and then it listed the response that the father gave her, which is what I assume is they're saying is the correct response, is, Elizabeth, I know how you feel, it's disappointing not to win, but you know you haven't earned it yet. There were many girls there who have been in gymnastics longer than you, who have worked a lot harder than you. If this
Might
is-
not be my version of descriptive
Yeah.
reinforcement.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah,
about.
I
Why
don't-
don't there be an in-between where you say, you know, even though you didn't win, you did well, just keep practicing, you're gonna get better.
Yes.
Okay,
yes, yes.
that was the only
A
part
lot
that
of
really
the stuff,
bothered me.
like the green
She
and the
doesn't-
black, they're
she
the
doesn't
theories. Our
Care
approach,
about this girl.
doesn't-
It helps her
is
to
not-
feel better.
I don't think she spells out how you do it. She gives a theory. That's an example of someone that is applying the theory. I would not apply it like that at all. In fact, I would probably use empathy first.
Okay.
I'd also give a personal message that, you know, I hope that I am able to support you in a way that you feel like, you know, with her sewing example, that you feel successful even if you didn't win. And then I might do the descriptive reinforcement.
Okay, I'm
But
glad
I
it wasn't
wouldn't
just
do
me,
that
because
either.
literally, like, my jaw dropped. I was like, what?
I'm glad. Yeah, that is not the way I teach. I mean, descriptive reinforcement is not that.
Okay.
That is not identify what she did and the effort or impact it had. That was a little embedded lesson in there, and it felt judgy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
So I had an experience this morning that I wanted to share. I have a wonderful opportunity. I work in the summers at a place called the Therapy and Learning Corner, and so it's mainly children preschoolers. I work with preschoolers who are either on the spectrum or have Down syndrome. So I just met this woman, and so I just kind of tag along and go into her classes, but I love going. To make a long story short, so Thursday mornings there's this little boy I'm just very attached to, and I realized this morning, I just had this aha moment that I just think we talk too much. So this is because now I've taken myself out of a situation where, because language doesn't matter, because these are children, he's 2.5, he's receptive, but he has no expressive skills at all. So we didn't repeat, so we were having this, we're playing with the Bristol blocks, and he's taking them out, and I'm going out, and he's putting them in, and I'm going in, and then they're going out, and they're going in, but I refrained from saying, I'm so proud you put them back in the bucket. No, we went out and in. Then he put 4 Bristol blocks together, which was clever, and he made a window, because they were 4. And I said, instead of saying, how clever, I was like, you put 4 squares together and made a bigger square. And when you don't have language and you're relying on body language and facial expressions, all of a sudden, and he just was so then he took it apart. And I said, what should we make now? And he made the same window. And I repeated myself, you took 4 squares and you made a big square. And I said, it looks like a window, because he does know, So, and then he crawls in my lap.
Oh.
But then I had this aha moment.
Yeah.
We have this relationship. It's not like this was new, but after last week's lesson, and not talking so much.
Oh my gosh.
Just not talking and just having this descriptive reinforcement. He went out and he took the Bristol blocks and he showed his mom. She doesn't know the conversation we had, but obviously he was proud of his 4 squares made 1 square. And then I thought,
just being noticed.
And I was sharing with Stephanie and Jody, like, oh my gosh, I think I talk too much.
I just think mom say.
I just think I talk too much. She just, and I said,
But when he showed her.
It's so much more peaceful when you're interacting like that.
Oh my gosh.
I know, I do.
Well,
And the
actually,
kids react differently too.
Lindsay had written it up, and that's her program, had written up the exercise, and then she said to me, because they always have something they're gonna work on, so she said, I encourage you to just let him put the piece of the Bristol blocks. It wasn't as personal as it was for me, I think, for that mom, but because it was more my aha moment, it really wasn't.
Exactly.
So, right, like, I don't know.
You didn't need
Mom
to
is-
teach her.
Right, mom is so harried,
Yeah.
she doesn't need to be told how to do this.
Yeah.
It was just an aha moment for me, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm doing it right now, and talk to him.
Actually, I don't, personal message, I don't think you talk too much. I've worked with lots of groups, and there's a nice balance in here. I can't, so there's some people that will monopolize and.
But no, I mean, not that, I'm just lazy. But in my classroom, I talk to her. But because I realized that you don't have to say, every time you get a picture, oh my gosh, that's the best, let me put it up on the board. It's okay to
It's
say.
exhausting. That's the other article I was going to send you called Getting Out of Their Way. It's along the lines of what you described, but the gist is just that. What is it that is this compulsion to comment and all the time?
No.
And,
I noticed that once I've stopped commenting, they come to me for more of it though, so it's like,
oh,
I've
well,
noticed that
that's
once I
breaking a
stopped.
bad I feel like that's a dynamic that's a habit. And it's hard to shift that dynamic because with nothing in its place, they're kind of like, well, what do you think? You don't like me.
yeah.
And so it takes a while to shift the dynamic with the child who's been brought up like that. I remember my son. I went to my first parent-teacher conference. He was like in the 3-year-old. And the teacher, at the time, she was incredible. She just basically said, I think you praise him too much. And she said, because basically he'll do anything. He's like, is it good or bad? And I was all into the praise and the reinforcement, and I even thought I was so clever because I didn't say good job. I'd say, oh, good job sweeping. It's the same darn thing. And so it took a while and he's still a little bit like we created a bit of a monster. He loves sports because the feedback is like, good job, good job, good job. And he's like a puppy dog. Yeah.
I think that teachers are sometimes worried about that too, because one of my teachers last year said, I'm gonna sit back and watch. Because we talk about the month of September especially being like, don't bring anything, like just get to know them and whatever. And she kept saying, but I'm just watching. And she kept telling me that she was doing that. Like she's not interfering, she's watching. And I'm like, that's okay. Like I think that it's this feeling that you're not working.
Permission that you're not working.
Yeah,
that
they
you're
feel
not
like
working.
they're not working. And you
Yeah.
are working, you're building a relationship and you're
Yeah.
getting to know, but you don't have to be in it sometimes. You just have
Yeah.
to observe it. Too.
Reminds me of this exercise that a very wise educator once taught me, and it's along those very same lines. So actually, I'm gonna have you all do this next after this class. So all you do is simply in the next week, take 5 minutes, that's it, and go and sit and observe. Just sit with a child while they're building or coloring with your own child, and just sit and watch. Look at the way they hold their little hands, like around a crayon. Look at, just the way their head tilts, their mannerisms, and just simply sit there and don't say anything. Just observe, no judgment, you're just observing, and see what happens. It is very powerful. And what you get often is the child will come sit in your lap, and to me that was just incredible. When I did that with my own daughter, I just realized this calm came over her, and the rest of the afternoon it's like she felt seen.
She's not trying to get your attention.
And I didn't, there was no comments. They might be like a little, like, what are you doing? Why are you watching me? You could talk then, but just see what you notice. So how about the science of character? Did you all have a chance to watch that video? A little bit different than the skill, but I do love that they mentioned Dweck in there. And I think the message that I wanted to really focus on was just the power of focusing on strengths. Because I think as educators and parents, I mean, a lot of times what's been internalized is my role is to help make them successful. And in doing so, we focus on the problems we need to fix and build, as opposed to their strengths right there in front of us. And actually, a lot of the strength research has actually talked about how when you focus on strengths as opposed to building up the things that your weaknesses, those people are more productive and successful. So I just thought I'd share that one with you. And also going back to the things, so just refocusing on what we value.
Talks about mindset also.
That's the Dweck stuff.
Yeah, science of character.
Yes.
That's what I said. Fixed mindset, that you're stuck with your traits, or growth mindset, that you can change.
Yeah, I love that she mentioned Carol Dweck in that video. And I think they're great for sharing with kids too, maybe not preschool kids, but there's a bunch of resources on that website for educators. Okay, let's move or shift gears to inductive discipline, which is the skill today, which you'll probably like because it involves very little talking. So inductive discipline is the last skill, and it's like descriptive reinforcement. I do think of it as kind of a behavior approach. And so we're going to talk about what it is, how it's different than other forms of discipline, more ineffective forms of discipline, why it's necessary or important, and then how it works. And then we'll practice with some of your own examples. So there's so many different approaches to discipline, and it turns out that a lot of our approaches are actually quite ineffective. Ross Greene, as you know, doesn't believe in any adult imposed consequences, because his belief is that the natural consequences are already negative enough. They need skills. You need to teach them the skills, and that is far more effective. I actually think that consequences adult imposed are necessary. especially if you're an educator and you have a bunch of kids around. But there are 3 different types of ineffective as compared to inductive discipline and support. In fact, I thought I'd just take a minute and go over some of these. So power assertive discipline is essentially asserting your power, the threats, and it's kind of like harsh criticism and threats of physical or verbal consequences that don't necessarily match what the child did. And we know that this leads to so physical discipline is included in here, and like harsh verbal criticism. Love withdrawn, kind of the opposite, is withholding affection or attention to try and get the child to do something that you prefer. And then there's the soft discipline, which I think is very easy to fall into. That's the attempt to discipline when you're not really clear. And so it's the, for the 10th time I told you, yada, yada, yada. Not following through, being inconsistent. As opposed to inductive discipline, which involves stating rules and limits in a manner that's clear and concise, really pretty darn short, but it's specific. Identifying consequences for misbehavior ahead of time. So we're going to practice that and come up with some consequences. Choosing consequences that relate to the behavior the adult is trying to teach and are adequate in strength, not too strong and not too weak. If they're too weak, you'll increase the strength of the negative behavior, and if they're too strong, you build resentment, which sabotages your ability to form that trusting relationship. And they're consistently enforced. And the whole idea of inductive discipline is that while in the moment you're not explaining the reason why, because you don't do it at this stage, but at some point it will be clear they can induce or figure out why it is that you impose that consequence. There's a reason, and it's linked back to their long-term things that you're working on for them to be successful. It's an approach to managing behaviors that focuses on helping children internalize standards of conduct that are in line with one's values and to develop the self-control necessary to act in accordance with that. And so, again, in this skill, you're not explaining. You can do that with the other skills. When you're at this stage, it's just, we just want to be changing their behavior. So let's look at why it's important. It's important, you need it because they need to be safe, they need to have order in order to learn and grow. And there's also a reason in that until about late adolescence, some people say as late as 27, the frontal lobe area of our brains aren't fully developed, which is the area for self-control and being able to follow through when a rule or a limit or expectation is placed on a child. So they don't really have that fully developed. So we do need to be there